Imagine this: a signal, faint but undeniable, traveling across the dark ocean of space, a final whisper from something we thought we barely understood. And what it carried, my friends, was the very thing humanity feared the most. Before we get into the details, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because what we are about to unravel could change how you see the universe forever. Now, let's begin. The story of 3I divided by Atlas doesn't start with its so-called final transmission. It begins quietly, with a flicker in the darkness, a strange dot moving against the familiar stars. Astronomers first spotted it as just another traveler, an interstellar visitor from beyond our solar system, much like Oumuamua years before. But soon, as data piled up, whispers began to spread in the scientific community. Something about 3I divided by Atlas didn't quite add up. It was moving in ways that weren't entirely expected. Its brightness didn't behave like a normal comet. Sometimes it would flare, almost as if reflecting sunlight from strange angles. Other times it dimmed in ways that puzzled even the most seasoned astronomers. But perhaps the most unsettling clue of all was its silence, followed by what seemed to be a sudden burst of communication. You see, when objects drift through the solar system, we watch, we measure, we track their path. But no one expected 3I divided by Atlas to send anything back. And yet, as it passed by the reach of certain deep space monitoring arrays, something was picked up. A pattern, a pulse, a final transmission. But before we dive into that signal, let's paint a picture. Imagine drifting through the cold vacuum. Far from the warmth of the Sunday, the stars are sharp and endless. The silence is absolute, broken only by the steady hum of space itself. And out of this silence, a rock, or perhaps more than just a rock, glides silently toward us. Its icy body, bigger than originally estimated, reflects the faintest blue shimmer, almost as if it carried secrets frozen into its core. Astronomers realized quickly that 3I divided by Atlas wasn't small. It was massive, much larger than predictions suggested. The James Webb Space Telescope, with its unmatched ability to see detail, confirmed the shocking truth. 3I divided by Atlas was no mere fragment. It was a giant, a traveler whose size could rival entire cities on Earth. And then it spoke. At first, the signal was brushed aside. Space is noisy. Cosmic rays, background radiation, interference from satellites, all of it can make instruments twitch. But this wasn't random noise. It repeated. It had structure. It had intention. A transmission, as though 3I divided by Atlas wasn't just drifting, but watching. Now, let's pause here for a moment. Think about it. For thousands of years, humanity has looked up at the stars and wondered if we were alone. We built telescopes, we sent probes, we pointed radio dishes into the dark, waiting for something to answer. And then, when the answer may have finally come, it wasn't from a star system sending a message. It was from a visitor passing right through our own backyard. The more researchers looked, the clearer it became that this wasn't a mistake. The transmission was deliberate, and it wasn't just data, it was a warning. The first question scientists asked was simple. What exactly is this signal? Was it natural? Was it some kind of cosmic fluke? Or was it intentional? You see, in astronomy, most things can be explained. A star flickers because dust passes in front of it. A signal crackles because of interference from Earth. Even strange bursts of light, like fast radio bursts, can sometimes be tied to magnetars collapsed, hypermagnetic stars sending out pulses across the universe. But this was different. The signal from 3I divided by Atlas had rhythm. It had spacing. It didn't look random, like background noise, but patterned, almost like a heartbeat. Scientists ran it through algorithms, expecting it to break apart into nothing. But every time, the data showed the same thing: repetition, symmetry, structure. And then came the chilling part. The pattern matched no known cosmic source, no pulsar, no quasar, nothing natural. It was as though the object itself, this icy traveler from interstellar space, had spoken. Now imagine the scene. In a quiet control room, astronomers leaned forward, staring at monitors as faint lines of data scrolled across the screen. The hum of the air conditioning, the soft tapping of keyboards, the occasional clearing of a throat, all of it faded into silence as everyone realized the same truth. This was not an accident. Something was trying to communicate. But here's where it gets even more unsettling. The James Webb Telescope, as powerful as it is, wasn't just measuring size and brightness. It was also mapping heat signatures. And what it saw didn't make sense. 3I divided by Atlas wasn't just reflecting sunlight. It was giving off warmth, not a lot, not like a star or even a planet, but enough to raise eyebrows, enough to make people whisper the unthinkable. Could there be machinery buried under that ice? Could this comet be something more? The object was growing more mysterious by the day, bigger than expected, sending out patterns, emitting faint warmth. And now, the transmission, this so-called final message, began to show something terrifying. When decoded, even in its most basic form, the pulse carried a warning-like structure. Rising tones, then silence. Rising tones, then silence. A crescendo followed by stillness. Some called it coincidence. Others said it resembled the kind of alerts Earth scientists send into space, not music, not conversation, but a beacon, a way of saying, danger ahead. Think about that. A traveler from deep space, bigger than a city, swinging through our solar system, and just before leaving our reach, it sends a warning. But a warning about what? This is where speculation exploded. Some suggested the signal was a dying echo, like the last gasp of an alien probe running out of power. Others believed it was intentional, a kind of broadcast aimed at whoever might be listening. And then there were those who took a darker view. They asked the question no one wanted to. What if 3I divided by Atlas wasn't warning us about space, but about something on Earth? For now, let's hold that thought. Imagine again the icy surface of 3I divided by Atlas, streaked with cracks from centuries of drifting through cold interstellar space. Imagine, hidden beneath that frozen shell, ancient mechanisms, or perhaps memories of a civilization we'll never know. The final transmission, a whisper in the dark, could be nothing more than the afterglow of something long dead. Or it could be the first sign of a story we're only just beginning to understand. And so, humanity was left with a choice. Dismiss the signal as coincidence, or face the possibility that we had just heard from something beyond. The debate over 3I divided by Atlas' final transmission split the scientific world in two. On one side, you had the skeptics. These were the seasoned astronomers, hardened by decades of debunking false alarms. To them, the signal was nothing more than background noise, the kind of thing you see when sensitive instruments push their limits. They reminded everyone of past mistakes. Signals once thought to be alien turned out to be microwave ovens, radio towers, or even pulsars we simply didn't understand yet. They argued, don't jump to conclusions. Space is vast, strange, and full of tricks. But then, there were the believers. And not just the fringe theorists. No, respected voices in the field began to raise eyebrows. They pointed out how clean the pattern was, how deliberate it looked, how unlikely it was to come from random static. One astronomer was quoted off record saying, "If this is noise, then the universe itself is playing games with us." The problem was this. If the signal was real, humanity was faced with a terrifying possibility. We were no longer alone. But let's pause here and imagine something. Picture Earth as a small, fragile bubble in the middle of endless darkness. For centuries, we've looked outward, searching, waiting, asking the question, is anybody out there? Now imagine the answer finally comes, but not from a friendly greeting, not from a clear voice. Instead, from a cryptic transmission hidden in the heartbeat of a dying comet. Not hello, but something closer to beware. That's what made scientists uneasy. If it was just data, just a curious anomaly, it would have been filed away in report. But the way the signal appeared right as 3I divided by Atlas drifted back into deep space, almost like a farewell gave it weight. It felt intentional, as though the universe itself had whispered something, and we were left straining to hear the word. The challenge was clear. How do you interpret a message when you don't even know the language? Some saw danger in even trying. They argued, what if acknowledging this signal is the very thing that puts us at risk? After all, when we send out messages into the cosmos, like the golden record on Voyager, we're exposing ourselves, showing where we are, what we sound like. What if 3I divided by Atlas was doing the same? Not warning us, but calling out to someone else? Others believed ignoring it would be worse. They argued, what if the signal is real and we do nothing? What if this was our one chance to understand something greater, a chance to prepare, a chance to know what lies beyond? And so, a problem settled over the scientific community, a shadow that stretched far beyond observatories and laboratories. This wasn't just about numbers or charts anymore. It was about humanity's place in the cosmos. Imagine the quiet tension of late-night meetings at space agencies. Teams gathered around screens, eyes red from lack of sleep, debating the meaning of a transmission that could change everything. Imagine the arguments half whispered, half shouted about whether to make the findings public or keep them under wraps until more was known. Because let's face it, news like this doesn't stay secret for long. And if the world learned that a traveler from another star system had sent out a warning, panic would spread faster than any comet across the sky. And that perhaps was the biggest challenge of all. How much truth can humanity handle? The deeper scientists dug into the 3I divided by Atlas transmission, the stranger it became. At first, it was just a rhythm, a repeating pattern, like a cosmic heartbeat. But as data analysts ran it through advanced algorithms, they noticed something unusual. The pattern wasn't random at all. It carried symmetry, the kind you see in human-made codes, the kind that suggests intention. Think about it. The universe is full of noise, radio bursts, stellar flares, electromagnetic chatter. But this wasn't messy. This was clean, too clean. One team compared it to the famous WOW signal, detected in 1977, which lasted only 72 seconds. But unlike that fleeting blip, 3I divided by Atlas's signal seemed layered, as if hiding information inside. It was almost like listening to a song where you can hear the melody, but you know there's a harmony beneath it you can't quite catch. So, the hunt began. Day by day, researchers peeled back the layers of sound, shifting frequencies, slowing them down, speeding them up, and then something clicked. They found that when the signal was slowed by exactly 42%, it revealed a secondary structure, a faint pulse hidden under the main beat. And when charted visually, those pulses formed shapes that looked like coordinates. But coordinates to where? Some pointed out they resembled star maps, distant systems many light years away. Others argued they matched regions closer to home, areas within our own galaxy where exoplanets had already been discovered. It was a puzzle wrapped in a riddle, and the more people looked, the more interpretations arose. And as always, once the rumors spread, the internet caught fire, forums lit up with theories. Was this a map of safe harbors in the galaxy? A warning to stay away from certain stars? Or maybe an invitation? The problem was this. Without a key to decode the message, everything remained speculation. It was like holding an ancient manuscript in a language no one could read. You could guess, you could argue, but you couldn't be sure. Yet, one detail unsettled the researchers most of all. When overlaying the signal's pulse with the comet's trajectory, they noticed a chilling coincidence. The rhythm, that repeating cosmic heartbeat, matched perfectly with the rotation of the comet itself. Almost as if the comet wasn't just carrying the message, but was part of the message. Imagine that for a moment. A rock hurtling through space, born in a distant system, carrying with it a coded rhythm tied to its very spin. That's not random. That feels designed. And so whispers began. Maybe 3I divided by Atlas wasn't just a comet at all. Maybe it was something more. A messenger, a probe, or even a warning buoy left behind in the dark. The exploration grew more desperate. Teams used AI models, language decoding software, and even compared the signal to Earth's own mathematical constants, pi, prime numbers, Fibonacci sequences, looking for a bridge, a handshake, something universal that could unlock the meaning. And then one breakthrough came. A young researcher in Finland noticed that when you layered the signal over the natural frequency of hydrogen, the most abundant element in the universe, the static resolved into something sharper, like a voice struggling to come through the storm. It wasn't words, not in any human sense, but it carried structure. Rise, fall, pause, repeat. And when the rhythm was mapped out visually, it formed something hauntingly familiar, a spiral. Not just any spiral, but one that mirrored the arms of our own Milky Way galaxy. Now the question wasn't, is it a signal? But what is it trying to tell us? Because a spiral isn't just a shape. It's a symbol. It can mean creation, motion, or destruction. The spiral hidden in the transmission became the obsession of every scientific group that laid eyes on it. At first, it was just excitement, the thrill of discovery, the possibility that humanity had stumbled across something no one else had ever seen. But soon, the excitement gave way to unease, because the more people studied the spiral, the more it began to feel deliberate. Imagine tracing the arms of the Milky Way with your finger on a star chart. Billions of stars stretched across a vast galactic canvas. Now, picture one small red dot pulsing in rhythm, again and again, marking a single location. That's what scientists saw when they overlaid the spiral pattern on the galaxy. It was pointing, directing, almost warning. And the coordinates? They weren't random. They aligned frighteningly close to a region of space known for its instability, a sector where high-energy radiation bursts had been recorded, where dead stars and black holes lingered in silence. Why would an interstellar object carry a map leading there, unless it was trying to tell us to stay away? Of course, not everyone agreed. Some thought it was the opposite, that it was an invitation. That perhaps, somewhere near those stars, another civilization existed. That maybe they wanted us to find them. The argument spilled far beyond the walls of research labs. News outlets began running stories, each one more sensational than the last. Some headlines called it the first alien message. Others labeled it the cosmic warning of doom. And then came the leaks. A whistleblower from one of the space agencies claimed that parts of the transmission had been deliberately withheld from the public. That inside the hidden layers of static, there wasn't just a spiral, but also something more complex, something that looked like a symbol. Imagine that a shape woven into the noise of the universe, carried by a comet from another star. The alleged leak described it as a crude outline, like a figure drawn in starlight. Some saw it as a humanoid shape. Others swore it resembled an eye, a single, watching eye, gazing outward into the void. Suddenly, the spiral wasn't just a puzzle. It became a mystery wrapped in fear. People began to ask questions that no one wanted to answer. Was the signal meant for us? Or were we just eavesdropping on a message never intended for human ears? Could the comet have been placed in its trajectory on purpose, like a bottle tossed into the cosmic ocean? And most unsettling of all, what if the signal wasn't a greeting, but a warning to others about us? Governments grew tight-lipped. reports surfaced that deep space monitoring stations were no longer releasing their raw data. Amateur radio astronomers who had once tracked the signal said their feeds suddenly went quiet. Some claimed interference, others hinted at deliberate jamming. It was as if someone somewhere had decided humanity had learned enough. But secrets don't stay buried in the digital age. Forums exploded with theories. Dark YouTube channels produced grainy videos claiming to show hidden spectrograms of the transmission. TikTok clips went viral, distorting the sound into eerie hums that millions replayed late at night, convinced they heard voices within it. And maybe some really did. One story came from a small observatory in Chile. A night technician reported hearing the signal bleed into his equipment like a whispering voice. He swore the static wasn't just noise. He said it repeated the same phrase in a language no one could recognize. When asked to mimic the sound, he described it as low, elongated, almost like a chant. Of course, skeptics laughed it off. But the seed was planted. And so the spiral grew heavier, more ominous. It wasn't just a pattern anymore. It became an idea, a story, a weight pressing on everyone who studied it. The Comet 3I divided by Atlas was now more than just an interstellar visitor. It had become a messenger of the unknown, a cosmic riddle dangling before humanity, daring us to solve it. And while scientists wrestled with data, ordinary people wrestled with something else. Fear. Fear of what it meant. Fear of what might come next. Fear of the possibility that the message wasn't meant to enlighten us, but to prepare us. Prepare us for what? That was the question no one could answer. And yet, as weeks passed, the comet drifted further into the black, fading from view, leaving only its signal behind. Like a ghost ship that had passed in the night, it left humanity haunted with questions. Was this a beginning? Or was it a countdown? The spiral faded from headlines as quickly as it had appeared, drowned beneath the noise of daily life. But in quiet corners of the world, it refused to be forgotten. A strange thing began happening. People who had never cared about astronomy started to notice patterns. It began with the dreamers. Reports surfaced of people having vivid, almost cinematic dreams after listening to the leaked recordings of the signal. Some said they saw vast spirals of light drifting across the night sky. Others described a figure, tall, shadowed, faceless, standing, motionless at the edge of their vision. One woman in Finland claimed she woke from such a dream with a phrase burned into her memory. It wasn't in Finnish. It wasn't in any language she knew. When she wrote it down and shared it online, others immediately recognized it. It matched strange phonetic fragments buried deep in the transmission itself. Coincidence? Maybe. But coincidences piled up quickly. In South America, entire villages reported hearing hums in the night sky, a low droning that faded as suddenly as it began. In the American Southwest, desert ham radio operators swore their sets were hijacked by faint, looping echoes of the spiral's tones, as if the transmission had begun to bleed into the atmosphere itself. Governments tried to calm the noise. Official statements dismissed the spiral as nothing more than natural interference, a quirk of physics, a meaningless byproduct of interstellar travel. But the more they dismissed, the less people believed. And then something shifted. Astronomers noticed unusual fluctuations in deep space monitoring equipment. They weren't connected to the comet anymore that had already drifted far beyond visibility. These were fresh disturbances, as if something else out there had begun transmitting. But this time, the signals weren't faint. They were strong, too strong. And the pattern wasn't random static. It was pulsing, rhythmic, almost biological. Imagine sitting alone in the dark and suddenly hearing a heartbeat, not your own, but a slow, deliberate thump that seems to come from everywhere at once. That's how researchers described the new disturbance. It was as if the universe itself was breathing. But here's where things grew even stranger. The location of the pulses lined up perfectly with the same coordinates marked by the spiral. The comet had pointed to this place for a reason. And now, something was waking there. Whispers of panic leaked from classified briefings. Scientists who had once laughed off the transmission now spoke in hushed tones about anomaly clusters and non-random synchronizations. A few even quit their posts entirely, claiming they didn't sign up for this. Meanwhile, outside of labs and observatories, the world began to feel unsettled. Birds migrating off-season, power grids flickering without cause, strange alignments in the night sky that amateur stargazers swore hadn't been there the week before. It was as if Earth itself had begun to feel the weight of the signal. But the most chilling moment came from Voyager 1, humanity's lone messenger, drifting at the edge of interstellar space. Long silent except for its faint whisper back home, it suddenly registered an anomaly in its data stream. For the first time in decades, its instruments picked up something unexpected. A faint echo, a reflection, as if the very same spiral signal had reached out, bounced off something unseen, and returned like a mirror in the void. What could reflect a signal in the emptiness between stars? No one knew. All that was clear was this. The comet had carried more than ice and rock. It had carried a message, and whatever sent it wasn't silent anymore. The question now was simple and terrifying. Was this a reply, or was it a summons? For weeks, the heartbeat-like pulses continued. They rose and fell in strength, steady but never random. At first, they were treated like a curiosity, unusual, yes, but perhaps still explainable through natural phenomena. That belief didn't last long. Deep in a secure research facility, a small team of analysts began running the signals through advanced pattern recognition software. They expected nothing, just to prove, once and for all, that this was nature playing tricks. But then the software flagged something. Not once, not twice, but over and over again. The pulses weren't just sound. They carried structure, mathematical structure. Ratios appeared within the intervals, repeating in a way nature rarely does without guidance. Fibonacci sequences, prime numbers, patterns that screamed intelligence. At first, the team thought it might be coincidence, the kind of false positive that computers sometimes spit out. But when they slowed the pulses down, mapping them visually, something chilling emerged. The signal wasn't noise, it was a code. Imagine staring at a static on an old television screen, only to slowly realize the dots are arranging themselves into letters, into words. That was the moment humanity crossed a line. The spiral in the sky had been the first sign. The pulsing heartbeat was the second. And now, the code was the third. The lead analyst, a quiet man who had worked in radio astronomy for decades, described the feeling in his report. It is as if someone or something is knocking at the door, not once, not twice, but patiently, rhythmically, waiting for us to answer. But here's the part that unsettled even the most skeptical scientists. When translated into a crude spectrogram, the kind that turns sound into images, the pulses didn't just form random shapes. They formed a spiral. The same spiral people had seen in the sky, the same spiral whispered about in dreams, the same spiral first carried by 3I divided by Atlas as it streaked past Earth. It was undeniable now. The spiral was a message, and if the spiral was a message, then someone had intended us to see it. But what did it mean? Theories exploded overnight. Some believed it was a warning, a kind of cosmic lighthouse flashing to say stay away. Others thought it was an invitation, a beacon calling humanity towards something hidden in the void. Governments, predictably, lock down information. But you can't lock down curiosity. Independent researchers began to run their own decodings, releasing strange diagrams, online spirals, waveforms, geometric lattices that seemed to hint at structures beyond human comprehension. And then came the breakthrough. Buried in the pulse pattern was something no one expected. A symbol, not a natural form, not a spiral, but something angular, deliberate, almost architectural. Some said it looked like an eye. Others said it looked like a doorway. But one thing was certain. It wasn't random. It was a design. And designs don't come from empty space. The realization spread like wildfire. The comet wasn't just a wandering traveler. It was a messenger, a courier, a vessel carrying a signal across unimaginable distances. And now, Earth had received that signal. But here's the question no one wanted to say out loud. If 3I divided by Atlas had delivered this transmission, then what or who had sent it? And more importantly, were they still out there? The symbol uncovered from the pulses became the new obsession. At first glance, it was simple, a geometric outline, sharp, almost too sharp for something carried across light years of distortion. But the more they studied it, the more the strangeness grew. Every angle of the design matched ratios found in advanced physics, proportions that mirrored orbital mechanics, curves that echoed the way galaxies swirl. It was as if the symbol wasn't just a picture, but a formula, something alive with meaning. A group of mathematicians compared it to the golden ratio, that universal constant that shows up in seashells, hurricanes, galaxies, and even the way trees branch. The symbol carried that same fingerprint. But layered on top was something else. Something human eyes weren't supposed to notice so easily. It looked like architecture. Imagine staring at the floor plan of a structure, walls, corridors, entrances. To some, It resembled a gateway, a frame for something larger. Others insisted it was the outline of a vessel, something capable of travel far beyond anything we've ever built. The more they stared, the more it seemed to shift. When rotated, the symbol aligned with ancient star maps, pointing toward regions of the sky humanity rarely observes. When mirrored, it revealed a pattern similar to the double helix of DNA. Coincidence, skeptics said, but coincidences don't line up so perfectly. And here's where things began to take an eerie turn. The James Webb Telescope, the most advanced eye humanity has ever opened to the universe, was pointed toward the region of space suggested by the symbol. Webb's deep field gaze revealed something faint but undeniable. In the darkness, nestled among the scattered stars, there was structure. Not a planet, not a nebula, not a natural body. It was sharp, linear, angular. It was something that should not exist in the vacuum of space. Scientists refused to label it at first. They said words like anomaly, artifact, distortion. But privately, the whispers grew. It looked like the outline of a construct, something built, something vast. Some said it resembled a ring, stretching wider than Earth's orbit. Others thought it was the shell of a Dyson-like sphere, the kind of megastructure theorized to harvest energy directly from stars. But the most chilling interpretation came from those studying the original symbol. The structure Webb captured matched it perfectly. That meant the transmission wasn't abstract. It wasn't metaphorical. It was a set of directions pointing to something real, something waiting. And if the comet was carrying this message, then its purpose was clear. It wasn't just a visitor. It was a courier delivering coordinates that led directly to them. When the images from Webb leaked into private channels, the first instinct was denial. No one wanted to believe what they were seeing. Something that large, that precise, existing in the black between the stars. It was too much. It challenged everything humanity thought it knew about its place in the universe. Officially, agencies downplayed it. NASA called it a misinterpretation of light patterns. The European Space Agency labeled it data artifacts. Astronomers who spoke too openly found their interviews cut, their articles withdrawn. But the whispers were louder than the denials. Behind closed doors, governments scrambled. Military strategists, astrophysicists, even linguists were summoned in haste. The discovery wasn't just a scientific puzzle anymore. It was a matter of survival. Because if the symbol matched the construct, then someone or something wanted humanity to notice. Panic bled quietly into the scientific community. Some believed the structure was long dead, a relic drifting in silence, like the bones of an ancient civilization. Others feared it was still alive, still functioning, watching. The most unsettling theory, however, was that the transmission itself, carried by Comet 3, I divided by Atlas, was an activation signal, a key, a knock on the door. And if humanity had just decoded it, then the door had been opened. News didn't travel in headlines, but in rumors. astronomers swore their telescopes were being restricted, data pipelines were rerouted, even citizen scientists who used backyard observatories found themselves suddenly cut off from deep sky survey archives. Governments wanted control, not because they understood the message fully, but because they didn't, and in that ignorance, fear grew. Meetings were held in silence. No recordings, no transcripts. Just men and women staring at grainy projections of the web images and asking the same question over and over again. What do we do if it's true? And here's the part that gnawed at them most. If the construct was real, it had existed for millions of years, perhaps longer. Whoever had built it was either unimaginably advanced or unimaginably gone. Either outcome was terrifying. And yet, the comet hadn't wandered randomly into our neighborhood. It had delivered something deliberately, a final transmission. That meant the builders, whoever they were, knew where to send it. They knew Earth was here. They knew humanity was listening. And maybe, just maybe, they had been waiting for this moment all along. The symbol, that single sharp-edged shape that appeared in the web's enhanced data frames, it became the center of everything. At first glance, it was simple, a geometric pattern, angular, symmetrical, almost too clean to be a natural phenomenon. Scientists called it artifact geometry, meaning something that didn't occur by chance in the chaos of space. But when experts across disciplines examined it, they began to disagree violently. Mathematicians noticed ratios hidden in the design. Ratios that weren't random, they matched the same golden proportion that governed spirals in seashells, galaxies, and even human DNA. It was as if the universe itself had signed the symbol. Linguists thought it looked like a script. Not a letter, not a word, but a marker. Some compared it to ancient petroglyphs carved into stone thousands of years ago. Symbols humans never fully decoded, yet felt compelled to replicate across cultures. Historians went pale. Some claimed the shape had appeared in humanity's past, on tablets in Mesopotamia, on carvings in Mesoamerica, even in strange diagrams drawn by mystics who had never seen the stars through telescopes. The debate wasn't about whether the symbol was real. It was about why it kept showing up. Religious scholars saw prophecy. To them, it was a mark of revelation, a cosmic warning sign humanity had ignored until now. Philosophers argued that it wasn't a warning at all, but a map. Perhaps the construct was a beacon, and the symbol was a coordinate, a cosmic arrow pointing to somewhere or something. But the darkest interpretation came from a small group of analysts who dared to say it aloud. What if the symbol wasn't meant for us? What if it was a tag? A label, a way of marking planets that had reached a certain stage of awareness? Like carving initials into a tree, the builders of the construct may have left their mark across galaxies, and now Earth had just joined the list. That theory spread quietly, but once it did, it was impossible to silence. Because if it were true, then Earth was no longer invisible in the vastness of space. Humanity had been catalogued. And worse, if there was a list, then someone or something might be checking it. That possibility was the real reason the symbol shook people more than any raw data ever could. Numbers could be debated, but symbols, they had weight. They carried meaning. They whispered to the subconscious in ways logic could never bury. In the end, no one agreed on a single interpretation. Some called it beauty. Some called it doom. Some said it meant nothing at all. But the truth? It didn't matter what humans believed. What mattered was what the sender intended. And that intention still waited in silence beyond the stars. So, if the construct was real, if the symbol was deliberate, then the question became impossible to ignore. Who built it? Some of the earliest theories came from the scientific side. Astrophysicists suggested that the construct could have been the work of a civilization so advanced that their technology appeared like magic to us. Clarke's third law, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic, became the rallying quote. If that were true, then maybe we weren't looking at something designed yesterday or even 1,000 years ago. It could have been crafted millions of years in the past when Earth's continents were still drifting apart. The builders may have been long gone, or they may still exist, watching silently. Another idea, the machine progenitor theory. This proposed that the construct wasn't made by living beings at all, but by machines. Imagine a civilization that reached a point where they built self-replicating probes. These probes traveled star to star, building structures, leaving markers, cataloging worlds. Over millennia, the machines continued their work even after their creators died out. The construct, then, might not be a message, but a byproduct, a breadcrumb from an ancient algorithm that never stopped running. Of course, humanity's imagination didn't stop at logic. Myths began to resurface. People compared the construct to the concept of the watcher beings mentioned in ancient texts set to observe humanity and record its progress. Others drew parallels to the Sumerian gods, the Anunnaki, or the sky people of oral traditions around the world. Maybe they said the stories weren't stories at all. Maybe they were fragmented memories of previous contacts. There was even a chilling theory whispered among the more superstitious, that the construct wasn't built to communicate at all, but to harvest. That it was a kind of cosmic net, a device designed to scan for intelligent life and wait. But one idea above all seemed to gain traction among ordinary people, something simple, almost poetic. That the construct wasn't a message for us, but for others. Like a cosmic lighthouse on a dark ocean, its presence was a signal. Here, this planet has reached the threshold. This world has learned to listen. And if lighthouses exist, then so do sailors. And sailors, sometimes, do not always come in peace. Still, amidst the fear, there was awe. Because if the construct had builders, whoever or whatever they were, then it meant humanity wasn't the first to rise up from the dust and look toward the stars. It meant that intelligence wasn't an accident. It was inevitable. And if others had walked this path before us, then maybe, just maybe, we weren't as alone as we feared. If the construct was real, and if it was intentional, then the most haunting question remained. Why was it built? Purpose is always harder to define than presence. A rock can sit in a field for 1,000 years, and no one wonders what it means. But the moment you shape that rock into a circle or carve a symbol into it, the mind can't help but search for intent. The construct was no different. Some scientists leaned on a comforting explanation. Perhaps it was a marker, a kind of galactic milepost. Ancient civilizations might have scattered these beacons across the cosmos, like breadcrumbs, to map their journeys. This theory felt safe because a milepost doesn't interfere. It simply exists quietly in the background. Others were not so calm. A growing camp proposed that the construct was a test. Imagine, for a moment, that the universe is a vast ocean. What if every so often advanced civilizations throw out a puzzle, a kind of cosmic exam to see who is ready? If you decode it, you pass. You are acknowledged. If not, perhaps you're simply overlooked, deemed unready for contact. But even that raised more chilling possibilities. What if failing wasn't the problem? What if passing was? What if unlocking the message brought attention that humanity wasn't prepared for? After all, sometimes the last thing you want in the dark ocean is for something bigger to notice your small, fragile ship. There were other, gentler theories. Some believed the construct was an archive, a time capsule of knowledge, waiting to be unlocked. Maybe it held stories of a civilization long gone, their history, their art, their science. Maybe, encoded in its structure, was the cure to diseases we haven't yet faced, or technologies that could help us survive when Earth can no longer sustain us. And then there were the dreamers. They imagined the construct not as a warning, not as a test, but as an invitation, a cosmic handshake extended across time and space, a signal that said, "You are not alone, come find us." But beneath all of this speculation ran a deeper current, the idea that maybe the purpose wasn't meant to be understood right away. Maybe that was the point, to force us to look up, to wonder, to work together as a species, to remind us that the sky above isn't just decoration, it's a puzzle waiting to be solved. The construct, in that sense, could be less about what it is and more about what it makes us become. Whether it was a milepost, a test, an archive, or an invitation, its existence reshaped the way humanity saw itself. It made us small, yes, but it also made us infinite, because for the first time, the stars weren't just silent lights in the night sky. They were speaking, and we were finally learning to listen. When news of the construct trickled out, first in quiet research papers, then in hushed leaks from observatories, and finally through the feverish chatter of online forums, humanity did what humanity always does. It split. Some people looked up at the stars with awe, their imaginations lit like candles. To them, the construct was hope, proof that we weren't drifting through an empty universe, doomed to solitude. These were the dreamers, the poets, the artists. They painted murals of golden rings hanging in the heavens. They wrote songs about bridges of light connecting worlds. They whispered to their children at night that maybe, just maybe, we had neighbors watching kindly from afar. Others reacted with fear. What if the construct wasn't kind? What if it was a trap? a lure, something left behind to pull us closer before snapping shut. These voices were loud, and they found eager listeners. They pointed to the message, garbled, heavy, strange, and said, "This doesn't sound like a greeting, it sounds like a warning." Governments scrambled. In public, they spoke cautiously, downplaying the discovery. They used words like possible anomaly, unverified signal, ongoing research. But behind closed doors, the tone was different. Satellites were redirected, telescopes given priority access. Defense agencies ran simulations of what would happen if a foreign technology, one far beyond ours, suddenly appeared in orbit. In laboratories, scientists became obsessed. Some tried to decode the signal as though it were math. Others treated it like music, searching for rhythms, harmonies, hidden notes. Linguists combed through ancient languages on Earth, wondering if the patterns echoed symbols from forgotten civilizations. Mathematicians worked with cryptographers, layering theories on top of theories until the diagrams on the whiteboards looked more like spider webs than solutions. And then there were the ordinary people. In small towns and crowded cities alike, families gathered around screens late at night, watching grainy images of the construct leak online. Some stared in wonder, others pulled curtains tighter, as if a shape in the farthest reaches of space could peer through their windows. Religions, too, split in response. Some declared it a divine sign proof of creation, a heavenly structure left by the hand of God. Others saw it as temptation, a false idol, a distraction meant to pull humanity away from faith. And somewhere, deep in the ocean of human curiosity, a new kind of movement was born. They called themselves the listeners. These weren't governments or official scientists. They were hobbyists, engineers, dreamers with radios and laptops in their basements. They pointed homemade antennas at the sky, scanning frequencies, convinced that if they just tuned in at the right moment, they could catch the construct speaking again. For months, blogs filled with speculation, podcasts whispered theories. Some said it was a time bomb, counting down. Others insisted it was dormant, waiting for us to answer in just the right way. But the strangest part? The world didn't stop. People still went to work. Children still played in parks. Lovers still argued about laundry and groceries. Life carried on, even as an alien puzzle hung silently in the heavens. And that might have been the most unsettling thing of all, because deep down, everyone knew, whether they admitted it or not, that the construct hadn't been explained. It hadn't gone away. It was still there, watching, waiting. Like a shadow on the horizon of human thought, it loomed, a reminder that we were no longer alone, and maybe never had been. For months, silence had been the only reply. The construct drifted in the black, its presence so still it almost felt lifeless. The world began to wonder if it had ever truly spoken at all, or if the strange message had been an illusion born from our hunger for meaning. Then, without warning, it happened. On a quiet night, when most of the planet slept, a handful of observatories caught the first signs. Not a signal, not a transmission, but movement. The construct shifted, slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, but undeniably. It turned. Imagine a cathedral the size of a moon rotating in the void. Its rings glinted against the starlight as if brushing away centuries of dust. And as it turned, the instruments here on Earth lit up in alarm. The signal had returned. But this time, it wasn't the broken, garbled tone scientists remembered. This was something deeper, louder. It pulsed like a heartbeat, resonating across frequencies no human ear could hear, yet rattling through the instruments as if the machines themselves were trembling. The first descriptions called it a choir of stone. Others said it sounded like the groan of mountains moving beneath oceans. But all agreed on one thing. It was not random. The rhythm was precise, intentional. At first, it seemed like a countdown. The pattern ticked with eerie regularity, as though time itself were being measured and marked. Researchers panicked. Was it a clock? Was it counting down to something? But then the rhythm changed. The pulses began to form pairs, then clusters, then layers upon layers, weaving into something more like a message than a warning. For hours the construct sang, and the world listened. Those awake in the middle of the night, amateur astronomers, insomniacs, curious listeners swore they could feel it. Not just hear it through recordings, but sense it in their bones, as if the vibration was passing through the earth itself. And then came the image, not on a screen, not on a telescope, but encoded in the very rhythm of the signal. Scientists translated the data into visual form, and what emerged silenced entire rooms. A shape, not a star chart, not a simple geometric figure, but something vast, something sprawling like a web stretching across galaxies. A map, perhaps, or a blueprint. It was incomplete, fragmented, but the outline was unmistakable. The construct was part of something larger. What we had seen, this massive, ring-like cathedral drifting in the dark, was not alone. It was just one piece of a network, a chain of silent watchers scattered across the cosmos. The world reeled. If one construct was enough to shake our understanding of existence, what would it mean if there were hundreds, thousands? And just when the signal reached its peak, just when humanity held its breath, waiting for the final revelation, it stopped. No fading, no gradual decline, just silence. The construct froze again, as though it had never moved at all. Instruments that moments ago were alive with sound fell still. The heartbeat ended, and the world was left staring into the dark, haunted by a single question that no one could answer. Was it trying to warn us or invite us? Silence. For days, then weeks, and then months, the construct remained still again. Humanity waited, but the cosmos offered no more answers. The scientists argued endlessly. Some claimed the final signal was a warning, a countdown that stopped too soon, leaving us unprepared for whatever comes next. Others believed it was a message of invitation, a call to follow, a breadcrumb leading us deeper into the universe. But maybe it was neither. Maybe it was something simpler, a voice from a civilization so far beyond us that its purpose can never be reduced to human logic. Perhaps what we heard was not a warning, nor an invitation, but simply a statement. We are here. You are not alone. And perhaps that was all it needed to say. As Voyager 2 once looked back and captured a faint blue dot in the vast emptiness, our tiny home, we are reminded of how small we are, how fragile, how fleeting, and yet how extraordinary it is that in the infinite darkness we may have been noticed at all. Tonight, as you drift into sleep, imagine the stars overhead. Imagine the construct out there, still floating, still silent, still waiting. And whether it wakes again tomorrow, or in 1,000 years, or never at all, the mystery remains. And maybe that's the most important thing of all. The universe isn't finished with us. Its secrets are still unfolding, one fragment at a time. So rest easy. The cosmos is vast, mysterious, and timeless, and you are part of that story too. If you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to subscribe and join me for the next story waiting just beyond the horizon. Another mystery, another night, another secret the universe is keeping. Good night.